I'll admit, I was unsure what sort of reaction posting my story might generate, but people showing interest rather than criticizing or minimizing what I was saying or attempting to dispel it outright was a welcome change to what those closest to me had said when I clued them in. So I'll stick to my word. I'll tell you more of what has happened. While I'm happy to have a sympathetic ear, or at least someone interested in what I'm saying without being overly skeptical, I'm still hoping there is someone out there who might have more information, an actual understanding of what I'm dealing with. So where did I leave off? Right, the morning after, and the week of absolute dread that would follow. While my wife's announcement about the scratches on the sliding glass door startled me, I didn't let it show. Waiting until I heard her close the front door as she left for work before I stood up and went to investigate. Sure enough, there were gouges in the glass. Not deep enough to penetrate through, but enough that they would leave a lasting mark. She thought it was a coyote, and that was a fair assumption with a cursory glance, but a closer look would have disparaged that notion. Even a coyote standing on its hind legs wouldn't reach that high, nor would they generate enough power to dig so deep into the tempered glass. The thing I had seen, monster or demon, an abomination to be sure, would have. My breathing grew a little quicker as I opened the door and stepped out onto the back deck, scanning around for anything I could collect to validate what I had hoped was a hallucination. Of course, I was disappointed, possibly even elated to find nothing. No footprints, though I hadn't expected any. Nothing out of place, and though there were smudges on the glass from where I had seen the creature run its tongue along, there was no black spittle that I could collect to bring to a lab as indisputable proof. Therefore, the monster remained where I thought it belonged, in my head, not ready to tell anyone that I was seeing things in the dark. Part of me was still hoping that with some rest and a few days away from any stress, it would disappear entirely. A nagging feeling remained, a small pinpoint of unease sitting at the bottom of my spine. The gut feeling I had heard so many older officers tell me not to ignore when I first joined the sheriff's department, and had given some thought to pursuing a career as a detective. Another mantra popped into my head. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That nugget of wisdom had been given to me by one of the crustiest NCOs the Marine Corps seldom lets out from beneath the armory, in answer to a complaint I made one day during my first tour in Afghanistan about why we were shoveling dirt into sandbags when we weren't expecting to be attacked. Those, of course, were not the actual words. Anyone who has met the type of man I am describing knows they say things that aren't fit to repeat, even in the company of hardened convicts and sailors. There is value in the statement, however, and I had long been putting off a few home improvements I'd been wanting to do. With nothing but free time, I decided the time for procrastination was over. A quick trip to the big box hardware store, and I returned with resin to fill in the gouges in the glass, as well as a powerful motion-activated floodlight, and a set of external cameras to mount around the house. Installing all of that ate up most of my morning and afternoon. A welcome distraction to my own thoughts and issues. I finished an hour or so before my wife was due home and decided I'd cook dinner. All in all, it was a peaceful day, and by nighttime, I joined her in bed and managed to find the sleep that had eluded me the night before. There was still some unease when I woke the next morning, and I hurried to check the video feeds, but there was nothing unnatural captured on them. In fact, the next 2 days were without issue entirely. On August 6th, Deputy Beagle finally succumbed to the injury he had suffered when engaging Thomas' friends. I didn't know the deputy personally, but we will forever be connected by what happened that day. Several of my colleagues would message me about Beagle's passing. Mutual sorrow runs deep in an organized body when a member is lost, but every one of them felt the need to acknowledge that I had avenged Beagle by killing friends. Oddly, I found no comfort in that, and a year later, I feel that none of them would be congratulating me, for if they truly accepted what I've come to know, that in killing friends, I played the pawn in a game high above my head. The funeral was several days later, but I opted not to attend, though I would pay my respects after. The mandated appointment with the counselor took place August 8th in a small office near the Helix County Mall, an uneventful meeting where I was forced to rehash the shooting and talk about how it made me feel. I lied, kept my answers brief, and made sure not to mention any of the stranger events or thoughts I had dealt with in the immediate aftermath. I'm not the only deputy to have bullshitted my way through one of these sessions, and I wouldn't be the last. It is good that they make this kind of help available, but that is conflicted by the ever-hanging specter that a misspoken statement or a wrong word in these sessions can wind up sandbagging or entirely eliminating your career, and thus there is always a hesitance to engage with it properly. If I felt any guilt about the killing or surviving, there might have been a discussion to be had, but the only issues I had were well beyond the capabilities of a shrink subsidizing their income with a county contract to handle. The 10th day of August brought me back to work, albeit on desk duty for a week before I was allowed back on the regular duty with the tactical team. While I would never forget what had happened on the day or night of the 2nd, it had been nearly a week without incident, and at that time I was willing to begin letting it slide into the thought that perhaps my brain had just gotten the better of me in the aftermath of a violent and upsetting day. Thankfully, we had a visitor arrive at the station that day to help dissuade me of that notion. I was sitting at the front desk of the lobby when the man arrived. "How can I help you?" I asked the man, stepping to the desk. I had taken him for a business type due to the suit he was wearing, but it was corrected when he reached into his coat pocket and produced a badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Agent Donovan with the FBI. I'm looking for a Deputy Belinsky." He peered down at the name tag on my beige uniform, read it, and then met my gaze. "Ah, that would be you. I've been trying to get a hold of you the past few days. I called a few times." "Yes, sir. Sorry, I've been off the past few days. What can I do for you?" I immediately knew what several of the unknown numbers that had called me during my suspension were. I felt slightly bad about having ducked this man's call, but I had figured it was reporters calling to try and get a statement on the shooting. It's so freaking hot here. I don't know how you all deal with it." Agent Donovan was a tall and heavy-set man, probably close enough to obese that whenever the FBI brought him in for physical, he might be sanctioned. Of course, he was also gray-haired and old enough that they could be long past caring about whether he had the capability to chase down a suspect on foot. A giant hand was fidgeting with his tie, and I could see beads of sweat around his collar. "I need to talk to you. Not out here. Can you get us into an interview room?" Paging a deputy to replace me at the desk, I led Donovan into the back, past the offices, stopping quickly to grab 2 bottles of water from an office fridge, and toward the basement cell block. The interview rooms were in a hallway just before you reached where we housed anyone who got arrested, and we found an unoccupied one, stepping inside. No two-way mirrors or other gimmicky decor. It was simply a plain-walled room, a table, and 2 chairs. I set one of the bottles down in front of Donovan, sat down, and cracked the other open for myself. "What does the FBI need from me?" I asked with a little curiosity, although I was certain that it could only be one thing. "Basic administration. I need to go over your statement regarding the shooting. Friends had been on our radar, and though we thought he was still active in Barron County, surprise, surprise, we get a notice that he has been killed down here." The agent set a briefcase down on the table, opening it up and digging through it until he produced a printed copy of my statement to Internal Affairs. "Good on you for that, by the way. If there was anybody who deserved it—" "Wait," I interjected, what he said finally lodging in. "You are already aware of him? Like, you knew what he was and what kind of crap he was up to?" "Like I said, we thought he was in Barron County still. He has always been slippery and able to operate under our nose. Didn't think he'd turn up 10 hours away." Donovan removed his coat, rumpling it and throwing it onto the table. On his forearm was a tattoo of the eagle, globe, and anchor, spurring at least a small sense of camaraderie between us. "You served?" I nodded at his tattoo, rolling up my sleeve and showing that I had the same brand tattooed on my right bicep. 8892, machine gunner. Fought in the Gulf. What about you? Iraq? Afghanistan. Twice. Rifleman. The attempt to breed familiarity worked, and I saw his expression soften a bit. "Look, I'm sure you've got questions. I'll tell you what I can, but we need to cover the report first. That good with you?" I nodded, and we soon got down to the details, going over the report of how the day had played out from the initial call-out until I had pulled the trigger in the master bedroom of the Treppa home. Donovan listened closely, cross-checking things I said against the report, occasionally wiping at the sweat that seemed perpetual on his face or chugging down the bottle of water. He rarely asked questions, which led me to believe that his earlier statement about this being formality to be true. Finally, as we reached the end of the report, he asked the question that blew away the week-long effort to restore a sense of normality to my mind. "Did you see any sign that there may have been an additional suspect in the house?" He glanced up from the report and met my gaze, and I thought I could see that he already knew the answer, but was hoping that it might be a different story. "What?" "No, just the one." I thought back to entering the house, the blood around Claire's body, the 2 sets of shoe prints easily identifiable as friends and Polacks. No one would have passed through that hallway without making an impression. "Are you saying he worked with a partner?" "A partner would make sense. Someone could have easily ran out the back when Polak and Beagle had first engaged friends at the front of the house. Someone could have followed me home when I left the station. Of course, they would have needed a flair for the dramatic to dress up in a costume and stand on my patio trying to scare me, but surely these weren't people in their right mind to begin with. It made a hell of a lot more sense to me than some other conclusions I could have rushed to. Then again, it made so little sense that even if Donovan hadn't shown me what he had, I would have disqualified that thought anyway. We suspect so, but we don't exactly have hard proof. The crime scenes this bastard left were always so messy it could be hard to tell, but Donovan filed my report away in his briefcase, dug in, and pulled out a manila folder. He opened it, found a gloss sheet, looking at it before handing it to me. 2021, Calvas City. We aren't sure if it is the first time he killed, but it is the first time we caught him on camera. Slaughtered 3 roommates in a duplex. Painted their walls with those symbols just like at the Trepa house. That was taken by an older closed-circuit security camera that the landlord had installed. The picture showed friends exiting the duplex, even looking directly at the camera. It was his face, his human face, not the abnormal face I seemed to remember every time I thought about him. His eyes looked dead, his shirt splattered with blood. Behind him, it looked like another figure, but the picture was distorted, almost like static was covering another person from being seen. If I thought back about the creature that I saw on my patio, I could easily put it there behind friends. I joined Donovan in starting to sweat, but I wasn't doing it because of the heat. March of 22, Tennerton. Friends broke into an apartment, killed a husband and wife, as well as their young son. Same deal, looked like a slaughterhouse. Bloody symbols all over the walls. We still have no clue what the hell they mean. Donovan loosened his tie, unbuttoned his collar, and leaned back in the chair, looking at me. A neighbor, elderly man, looked out his peephole as friends was leaving and said he saw 2 others walking behind him. Scared him so badly he started having a heart attack. Wouldn't say anything besides he saw 3 people. Another glossy photo was slid across the table to me. And sure enough, it showed friends walking down, 2 bodies of static following behind him. And I was certain I knew what they were. My mouth went dry. And I took a drink of water, and it almost hurt to swallow. Donovan could clearly see that the images were causing me some distress, though I doubt he knew why. He collected the photos, hand back in the folder, and he produced one more. It was a still from Darius's gun camera as we walked down the hallway. Barely visible in the corner of the image, as if peering out from the laundry room, was a static figure. Hell of a coincidence, don't you think? He asked, clearly waiting for my take on it. That couldn't be someone. We had the house surrounded at that point. It would have been thoroughly cleared once we had taken down friends. Could that thing I have seen been in the house with us all along, hiding away with how focused we were on the atrocities we saw and the task at hand? I'm inclined to believe you. This was from your teammate's gun camera. Apparently, the footage from yours got corrupted and it is not recoverable. Even asked the Bureau IT guys if they can do anything with it. No dice. He began to drum his fingers on the table before taking the photo back. The 2 body cameras didn't capture it. I don't know. Technology is outpacing me so quickly nowadays. I thought he might have some kind of jammer, but surely that wouldn't cover friends as well. And they didn't report finding anything of that kind at any of the scenes. One more thing. Again, a spread of photos was slid across the table to me. 6 of them this time. Calvas City, Tennerton. Those 3 are from Brenner County, and the last one is from the Trepper house. Don't know if that was just more of his crazy symbols, but those kind of look like foot or handprints. No? They did. Most of them, at least. 4 of the 6 showed what might be a foot or handprint in blood, all on the ceiling of their respective crime scenes. All 6 showed a series of punctures into the material, spread almost like an array of toes or fingers, like the gouges that had been made in my sliding glass door. It was the last one, from the Treppas, that disconcerted me the most. Almost like definitive proof that something had been in the house with us, and that it was likely the same monster I had seen that night. Where was this taken? I asked, but the blood splatter clued me in already. There was just a desire to have it confirmed. Above the sofa. Above Mr. Treppa's corpse. Of course, they have no ridge details, which means even if they were prints, we'd have nothing to compare them with. Thinking back, I remember the chaos of that scene. John Treppa's head bisected by what I assumed was gunfire. But now... So what you're saying is there could be 2 more complete psychopaths out there who just don't leave any trace of their passage aside from those markings. I looked up from the photos at Donovan, who just shrugged, collected the pictures, and placed them all back in his briefcase. I don't know. Wish I had a better answer. But like I said, we don't have hard proof. What we have is speculation at best. If it is a group, there is no telling how their front man getting plugged will shake up the dynamic. Gathering the material, Donovan put it all away into his briefcase and slid me his card with contact information. If you remember anything you think is worth mentioning, or something else pops up, give me a call. Yeah, sure. I took the card and tucked it away into my pocket, my mind racing with the reality that I might know something, but the unnerving thought that it was beyond belief. You did a good thing, taking friends down. Spared some families and friends of the victims from a trial. Couldn't imagine their grief if they had to deal with a mistrial. Donovan stood up, gathered his things, and headed toward the door. Don't let it weigh on you too much. Semper Fi. The door banged shut behind him, and I was on my own again, sinking my head into my palms as I thought about what I had just been told. It was all circumstantial evidence, wasn't it? Monsters aren't real. At least, not monsters of that kind. I'd seen true monstrosity at war, at the crime scenes I had witnessed throughout the years. They were all flesh and blood, like myself. My breathing began to get rapid, and I repeatedly told myself that these were all just deranged rituals of a crazed man who was now dead. After all, I hadn't seen anything else disturbing since the day of the shooting. Yet the thought remained. Another 30 minutes passed before I had myself straightened out enough to leave the interview room and return to the front desk. Work provided little distraction. My mind wouldn't tear away from the photos Donovan had shown me. The staticky figures and what I knew was lurking underneath. That these things had been to my house taunted me as I looked at it through the glass door. Only made me feel more unnerved. As my shift ended, I changed into my civilian clothes, strapped my duty weapon to my belt, and headed out into the parking lot. I was sitting on the back of my truck, smoking my 3rd cigarette since I had exited the station, when Darius approached me. Hey, Cliff. Man, They had you hidden in a cubicle all day? He stopped as he got closer, his eyes taking a good look at me. Shit, you feeling all right? You're looking a little pale. I'm just, it's just, I was so ready to spin another lie that it was becoming second nature. But something about what Donovan had showed me had clawed deeper into my brain and was fighting that instinct. And I felt the need to unburden myself, even if I did it in the most guarded manner. Can we go get a beer? I got something I need to talk about real quick. Darius nodded, and we agreed to meet at a small bar only a few blocks over. A brick building that guys from the department frequently celebrated at whenever there was a call to. It was fairly empty that day, only a few regulars and the staff there. The television was set to a baseball game. The Astros and the Orioles engaged in a tight affair. As we sat down at the corner booth, the waitress came over. A woman I had gone to high school with. Hey, boys. Cliff, I saw you in the paper. They're going to have to dedicate a whole article to you at the rate you're going. For what felt like the first time in a week, I laughed a little. Football legend, war hero, town savior. He's going to be shoo-in when he decides to get into politics. Darius added teasingly, further ribbing me as I sunk back into the booth. Definitely. Sheriff Belinsky, maybe? Don't worry, Cliff. If they call me asking for what kind of antics you got up to at those parties in high school, I'll keep them to myself. She smiled, perhaps flirting. That wasn't ever going any further than that. What can I get you to? Just 2 beers, please. We're not going to be long. I smiled back, and she left to fetch them, returning shortly and informing us they were on the house from the owner of the bar. Small talk came first, as we sat there nursing the beers, the bottles perspiring in our hands. How were the wives doing? Any plans coming up? The usual. At the time, there was still a prospect of the wife and I taking a trip to Hawaii, a plan that would never come to fruition. But I mentioned it. I asked about Darius's children, a boy and girl, both toddlers, and it was a topic he was always more than happy to go on about at length. Did the FBI want to talk to you? I finally asked once he exhausted the conversation table. Darius pulled another swig from his beer before setting it down on the coaster. Only for a few minutes. Wanted to go through the report and footage. You know, your gun cams footage got corrupted. The deputy chief called in, tore up the IT guys for losing it. Yeah, I heard that. It's kind of weird. I mean, I watched the footage with the guys from IA when we were going over everything. But before I could finish, Darius cut me off. About that, they were saying there was some kind of glitch on the footage. What happened? Well, I told myself to pick my words carefully. Darius was as close a friend as I had, but even something as crazy sounding as what I wanted to say might give him pause, a reason to tell the department I might have lost a screw. It distorted Prince's face. You know, the app the kids use that puts a filter on someone's picture. It was like that. Only it looked like something from a horror movie. You think that is what caused the recording to get corrupted? No. I mean, I'm no tech guy, but those cameras don't do anything beside adjust focus when necessary. They don't have anything advanced in them. Also, I don't think that's how computer files work. None of the other cameras had anything wrong with their footage. Only thing distorting his face was him dying, and good riddance at that. Guy was a sick bastard. Donovan said he was involved in several murders. I saw the files. He was definitely sick. I thought about the mysterious print that all the crime scenes shared, the static figure the cameras weren't able to capture. Did he ask you if friends had any partners? Yeah, he asked, but there was no one else at the house. We had it surrounded, cleared it top to bottom after. I guess it is possible that someone left as soon as it went sideways, but we didn't find any evidence. We both took another drink of beers. I noticed mine was depleting a little bit quicker than Darius. We even had deputies keeping an eye on out-of-towners, but they all checked out. So, if he did have associates, they're either laying low or already got the hell out of Dodge. They poke their heads up, we'll get them with a mallet. Would we? I wondered. If it was possible, there was something beyond our understanding. They were something potentially beyond our ability to handle. I'd have given anything for no associates to begin with, but Donovan had showed me enough that I believed they existed. And I was still clinging to hope that maybe they were just druggies or street variety psychopaths. But that hope was being smothered underneath the abnormal feat of the thing I had seen on my patio a week earlier. Do you believe in monsters? I asked, a question blurted before I had any time to second guess or think it over. Darius raised an eyebrow, leaning back in the booth and taking another drink. What? Like the chupacabra? Hey, it's real. I managed to recover quickly enough to play it off as a joke. When I was in high school, Otis Granger's goat got eaten by it. He got eaten by his dog, bro. I know because when I was doing patrol, we got called out there one night. The dog had eaten his neighbor's goat. Big ass dog. Was still licking its chops when we arrived. Next, you're going to tell me you believe, what's his name? Peter Malwark. You're going to tell me you believe he got abducted and probed by aliens? Nah, old Pete has certain predilections he wants to keep hidden from his wife. Hanging out at that bar near the theater. You know the one. Got to wonder if she believed him when he spun his tale. We both laughed, finishing off our beers. She knows. You don't spend that much time with someone without knowing their secrets. It's just a matter of whether you let them know that you know. Guarantee your wife knows you're smoking again. Probably just figures she'll give you a temporary break. Yeah, she's better than I deserve. I twirled the empty bottle for a second, once again telling myself I was overreacting. I'm gonna hit the head and then get on my way. I'll meet you outside. Darius nodded, waving goodbye to the waitress before going outside. I got up and went to the bathroom. I stood in the dirty restroom, both hands on the sink, fluorescent lighting illuminating the grunge and graffiti on the walls. Phone numbers I'd never call alongside promises I'd never take up scrawled into the tiles. I stared at myself in the mirror, shaking my head and telling myself to get it together. There was a growing sense that I was becoming two people. One who wanted to be rational, refuse what I had seen, and go about life. The other, frightened, their entire worldview coming apart with every new revelation. Eventually, one would win out over the other. It would just take a little more time and a few more kicks. A quick splash of water, another glance in the mirror to make sure my face was my own, and I exited the bathroom, making my way to the parking lot. I shook Darius's hand, thanked him for the time, and was about to depart when my cell phone began to ring. The familiar and unique tone I had assigned to my wife spurring me to answer quickly, knowing this was about the time she arrived home. Someone broke in! Her voice was panicked, and my gut sank immediately. I raised a hand and snapped my fingers several times to catch Darius's attention before he left. The door looks like it was kicked in. I don't know if someone is still in there. All right, babe. We'll be right there. Just stay down the driveway and out of sight. Doing my best to keep my tone steady and reassuring. I found my brain running away with the possibilities of what might be waiting for me in my home. Explaining to Darius quickly, we both jumped in our vehicles and began speeding toward my home. At any other time, I'd have been grateful to have a friend like him, who, when presented with a situation that can involve the unknown or dangerous, doesn't hesitate to help and assist. But with how things turned out, I now wish I had simply called the station and asked them to send a patrol car over. Instead, I brought my best friend into a trap, and what happened after is on me. He would become a victim of my refusal to confront the truth, and I will never forgive myself for it. I've apologized to his grave numerous times, but I'd take every apology back if it meant still have a chance for him to just assume I was going crazy. My wife was waiting near the beginning of our long driveway. Her car pulled to the side, and she came out from behind it to meet us as we pulled up. I hugged and comforted her for a second as she explained how she was just getting home when she noticed the door opened in an unnatural fashion and called me. Assuring her it would be okay, I told her to wait in my truck. Darius and I, pulling out our service pistols and slowly making our way toward the home. He waited near the front door as I circled around, ensuring that nothing else was open before I rejoined him. Clicking on the underbarrel flashlights, we stood by the side of the front door before stepping in. Helix County Sheriff's Department, come out with your hands up. I called out in my own home, wanting some desperate junkie to come shuffling out of the hallway of one of our bedrooms and surrender, but I had no such luck. Your home is supposed to be a fortress, a place of serenity and safety, but for the second time in nearly a week's span, mine had been violated, and now it was dark and foreboding, the setting sun offering no real illumination due to the curtains blocking it out, and I was suddenly aware of how many dark corners and hiding spaces it offered. We swept our lights around the living room, seeing nothing, using hand signals to communicate as we split up. Darius checked the kitchen, the dining room, one of the bathrooms, while I proceeded down the hallway, checking each bedroom, sweating and breathing heavily every time I was forced to open another door, feeling foolish each time I was confronted with nothing. Clear left, Darius called out. Clear right, I answered. We met again in the living room, turning off the flashlights and holstering the pistols. Must have been in and out. Probably happened earlier. Just report it to the station and put a claim in with insurance. I don't think anything's missing, though. Not that I noticed, at least. Yeah, well, you buy cheap shit. Who could blame 'em? I scoffed and forced a small laugh, turned on the lights, and brought my wife in once I was certain it was safe. The door had been kicked open, but there was no visible print on it. And fortunately, it had opened cleanly without damage. Darius helped me remount the hinges, stayed a few moments longer, and then began making his way home. My wife was a little shaken up, but I comforted her the best I could, and she eventually decided to just focus on routine, heading into the kitchen and working on making dinner. While she did, I thought about taking a shower, and then remembered I had the security camera set up, so I decided to review the footage to see if they had captured the intruder. The footage started innocuous enough. Several angles around my home, but I was focused on the front. Most of the day, there was nothing to see, save the mailman bringing a few pieces up to the mailbox. Then around 4:30, I saw it, and my face lost its color. Nothing I could show anyone but two figures of static advancing up my driveway, approaching my house until they moved out of frame when they entered. I was about to panic, to tear my house apart searching for them, but shortly after, the static figures returned to the picture and then moved toward the end of the driveway, disappearing beyond a few trees. A few moments longer, and then my wife had arrived. And then 10 minutes later, Darius and I pulled up. I watched until Darius was leaving. I was about to turn off the footage when my eyes caught it. There, underneath Darius's truck, where it should have been the undercarriage and driveway in view, it was blurred out by static. It never moved, just remained there. Even as he began to pull away, my eyes went wide. I pulled my phone from my pocket, fingers fumbling as I attempted to dial Darius's number. Somehow, I managed to get the call started. Pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up. I was yelling loud enough that my wife had come out of the kitchen to see what was happening, but I hardly noticed, distracted by the ringing in my ear and the lack of an answer I was receiving. Without saying anything else, I rushed out, jumped in my truck, and peeled out of the driveway. Speeding down the rural road, I began traveling the route I knew Darius would be taking toward his home. I hoped that is where he would be, but I continued calling his phone, and there was never an answer. As I made a left turn, passing a batch of brush and trees, I would discover why. Oh, God. No. I whispered quietly, putting my truck in park as I stepped out, my heart thudding in my chest as I took in the scene in front of me. Cautiously, I walked towards Darius's truck, flipped over. His cabin caved in. The hood smashed in from where it had impacted the truck of a tree before spinning out. Evidence of an accident scattered all over the roadway. I was clammy, cold, chilled to the bone despite it being a hot summer night. As I got closer, crouching down, looking inside of the cabin through the shattered driver's window, a thick pool of blood already pouring out from it. There, in front of me, was my best friend, dead, his eyes still open, the gouge across his neck, deep and fresh. On the overturned cabin of his roof, his service pistol sat there, his hand reaching out as if trying to grasp it. As I looked, I saw a single brass casing of a spent round. I sat down among the broken glass, just looking, my hand clutching at my face, unable to believe what I was seeing. The next few hours passed in a blink. I called and reported the accident, requested emergency responders, though they would be unable to do anything, and then accompanied Howell as we went to Darius's home to inform his wife. Her shrieking, that grieving scream and sobbing will stay with me forever. It was after midnight by the time I returned home, shuffling inside in a daze. My wife was waiting for me in bed, already aware of what had happened. And I'd rather keep the details of that conversation private. But I will say I cried. I lost a dear friend. There was no sleep to be had. Just sat there in my bed, staring at my roof in utter shock and sadness. It was around 2:30 a.m. when the floodlight I had installed outside had been tripped, its bright light punching through a crack in the curtains and illuminating the room. There on my roof, right where my eyes were focused, I saw it. 5 puncture marks in my ceiling, like an array of claws had been dug in. I wasn't spurred to any action. I just stared at it, knowing beyond belief at that moment that the monsters haunting me were real. This would not be the last act of horror I'd be subjected to, but it's hard to say it wasn't the worst. Though I guess I'll leave that to readers to judge. I miss Darius greatly. I feel a great sense of loss and a great sense of grief for what his family has endured. Of course, I know what happened. I knew as soon as I arrived on the scene, but a lack of proof has hindered my ability to convince anyone of what happened. If he was still around, perhaps I'd have someone in my corner. I'm still here, brother, and I promise I won't rest until I can make this right.